Alright, today we're going to explore level 2. We're going to write equations for the graphs that we see. Here are the steps. Refer back to this first slide whenever you need to, or screenshot it so that it's on your device separately while you look at the examples. Which blank equation you fill out is really based on the shape. So you first have to decide if it's a square root or a cube root. So if you can tell if you need to put the little 3 into the crook of the radical or not. And if it's a cube root, you just start filling in the rest of the steps. Find your middle point, pick another point on the graph so that you can solve for A, and then plug in A and H and K, and you'll have your equation. If you notice that you have a square root, you have to make one more decision. You have to notice if the arrow is left or right. If it's right, your x is positive, and so you pick the version with a positive x. If it's left, your x needs to be negative. Now here's the tricky part. You're going to have to remember to put a -1 and then parentheses around the x minus h, because that negative on the x has also actually made the h opposite as well. We just didn't notice that. So that's going to be something for us to have to get used to. So we'll make sure we do a couple examples of that. All right, examples time. All right, let's start with this one. At the top, we'll notice that it's a cube root. So we're going to fill out y equals a times cube root of x subtract h, and then plus k at the end. All right, that point highlighted there is not the middle point. That is not what I want to use for hk. I want to strive to find the point that's between the two pieces of the graph, the part that's going down and right and up and left. And so that's going to be right here. If I put my point there, I have it going up and down the same amount before it turns to the left or to the right. So that point is 2 and 7. And so that is my h and my k. The other point that's highlighted, 3, 5, that's my x and my y that I can also plug in to find a. All right, I'm going to plug those in two pieces, though, at 2 steps, because I want to be able to refer back to my equation when just h and k were filled out. So right here, actually I don't want that. Let's see, h was a 2, so I'm going to have minus 2, and I'm going to have plus 7. In my next step, that's when I'm going to put in the y and the x. The x was a 3. Okay, so I want to leave this part here with the x and the y in it, because if I can solve the math problem I just wrote, I'm going to know what a is, and then I can put it right here for this number, and then this will be what my equation will look like. All right, at this point, I need to use my brain or my calculator to figure out what 3 minus 2 is. Pretty sure I can use my brain on that one. So the cube root of 1. Okay, I'm going to use my brain or my calculator to find out what the cube root of 1 is. On a Casio, the cube root is right above the left parenthesis key. So you'll hit shift and the cube root. In the TIs, you'll have to press your math button before you can see the cube root. It's number 4 once you press the math button. All right, cube root of 1 is just 1. So a times 1 plus 7. Now just work backwards and we'll find a. So I will subtract 7. So -2 equals a times 1. Well, a times 1 is just a, so -2 equals a. I'm really done. If I plug that in, that will be the equation of the graph that we see. So we'll have y equals -2 times the cube root of x minus 2 plus 7. That was the equation that we see on the graph. Okay. Now, let's move on to this one. Hopefully I left enough space here. First, remember, look at the shape. It's a square root, and the arrow's on the left. It's going to the left. So, I'm going to have to remember to use a times the square root of -1 parentheses x minus h, so quantity x minus h, and then after the square roots plus k. All right, right here on the end, that's my starting point. That's my hk. That is 5, 4 this time. So I can plug that in. So -5, and then beyond the square root stopping, I have +4. Okay, so now I need a point, and that's this point highlighted over here, -4, 1. That's going to be my x and my y. So 1 equals a times -1 quantity, -4 minus 5. Whoops, that was supposed to be color-coded. Minus 5 plus 4. Now I start my math. Here's when you're going to see why that -1 needed to be there. When I put -4 and -5 together, that makes -9. If I did not have the square root of or did not have the -1 in the square root, I'd have an imaginary number right now. But instead, because the -1 is there, I'm able to multiply this together and have the square root of 9, which actually works. Square root of 9 is 3. And if I work backwards, I get my answer. So I'm going to subtract the 4. -3 equals a times 3. And then I'm going to have to divide by 3. So a equals -1. So that gets plugged in, and then I'll have my equation. Y equals -1 times the square root of -1 times x minus 5 plus 4. If you want to make it more typical looking, somebody would distribute the -1, and they would have -x plus 5 right here in their square root, but you don't have to. But that's why we haven't seen that before, because it's always been distributed when we were looking at our equations. Okay. Let's strive to do one more example here. That way we'll have one of every type. On this one, there's our square root shape, only one arrow. This time the arrow's on the right. So we would have y equals a times the square root of x minus h plus k. We don't need the -1 this time. That's only when the graph goes to the left. We do need our hk. It's 1/6. That's our starting point. So -1 and +6. And we do need an extra point so we can find a. That's that highlighted point there at 5, 8, x, y. So 8 equals a times x minus 1 plus 6. Whoops, I forgot I was plugging in an x there. And so that was supposed to be 5. Okay, once you get x and y plugged in, we start simplifying. So we should do our math problem in our square root, which is going to give us 5 minus 1 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So a times 2 plus 6. And then we start working backwards. So we subtract 6. 8 minus 6 is 2. Equals a times 2. We'll divide away the 2. And that's going to be 1. A equals 1. So we'll plug that in, and we'll have our equation. Now truly this time you probably don't have to put in the 1 because it can be an invisible 1 like we've dealt with when drawing our graphs. But it would look like this if you plug it in, which of course is allowed to be not shown. So you could write this. Okay, so there's one of everything. Hopefully you can find what you need. If you have questions in class, please ask.